Hello and welcome or welcome back to the Business of Story. If you are an ongoing listener, thank you. If this is your first time here, I hope you enjoy the show and feel free to share it with anyone that you think would benefit from today's guest who will help you excel through the stories you tell. After all, that's what we're here for. And I'm your host, Park Howell. By the way, last week we had on the legendary marketer Seth Godin. And today we feature another marvelous marketing mentor of mine, Jim Stengel, on how to use storytelling to profit from your brand purpose. But first, I'm wondering how your stories are traveling in the world. Are they accelerating meaning, or are they stalled in the intersection of confusion and boredom? Think of your stories as simply a vehicle to deliver a very important message. You choose the color, body style, look and feel of the content, and if you place it on the right chassis with a powerful engine and know how to drive it, then your communications will quickly turn heads and deliver your message to an eager audience. But despite all your best efforts, your stories are underperforming because, well, you simply don't know how to fine-tune them. Now you can drive your audiences to action by creating high-performance communications through our exclusive ABTs of Business Communications Mastery course. Have you registered yet? Because this hybrid course gets underway this week. But the good news is it's not too late to join the party. Our first live virtual session is this Thursday, June 1st. So you can register now at businessofstory.com. Click on the pop-up and start your storytelling journey by taking our short online course called The ABTs of Agile Communications. That way you can begin using this messaging marvel immediately. Then I'll host 2 live virtual sessions on June 1st and June 7th, 2023, to help you strengthen your storytelling skills with the DNA of all story structures, the ABT, the and, but, therefore narrative framework. Think of the ABT like the chassis to your communication race car. It's the narrative foundation for whatever body style of story you place on it. The ABT generates its high-octane power from the 3 forces of story, which include agreement, contradiction, and consequence. These forces fuel our primal, pattern-seeking, cause-and-effect limbic brain, where all of our real emotional buying decisions are actually being made. But regardless of the ABT's storytelling horsepower, you have to know how to steer it. It's the only way you will evolve from having your messages carelessly careening down the road to communications that carve through the traffic jam of competition and captivate your colleagues, your customers, and the communities you serve, driving them all to action quickly. That's why I've created this exclusive 4-week deliberate practice program to help you grow as a confident, clear, and persuasive communicator. It's only $250 with a 100% guarantee. If you're not completely satisfied, I will return your investment and you keep your newfound storytelling skills. I mean, what could be better? But there are only a few seats left for this intimate 25-person cohort, and I'd love for you to be a part of it. So register now at businessofstory.com, and I'll see you this Thursday at 10 a.m. Pacific Daylight Time to put you behind the wheel of the ABT, the storytelling Lamborghini. One of my all-time favorite books on brand building is called Grow: How Ideals Power Growth and Profit at the World's Greatest Companies. Jim Stengel, who was the global marketing officer at Procter & Gamble when he wrote Grow, is widely known for his leadership in the brand purpose movement and for his commitment to building leading-edge marketing capabilities. And as you'll hear, it's all about aligning your brand beliefs and values with what your customers believe and value.
We ended up saying, well, we're going to be about helping mothers with their kids' nutrition. So we're going to start providing nutrition information about our brand and other things. We asked moms what they were most concerned about, and it was their local schools. This was even back in the 80s. So we said, well, what could we do to help PTAs through our brand? We ended up doing a drive where every jar of Jif that was sold, we donated $0.10 per jar to the local PTA. That had a profound impact on our share. And you cut all this away, we were asking the question, how can we make a bigger impact on the people who we serve, and how can we align with their values more in a way that makes sense for our brand?
Jim is president and CEO of the Jim Stengel Company. He's a prolific writer, thought leader, and advisor. Jim also wrote Unleashing the Innovators: How Mature Companies Find New Life with Startups. He is host of the highly acclaimed The CMO podcast, where he reveals the stories of aspirational chief marketing officers to inspire others to make a larger impact in their business and in their life. Jim is also an adjunct professor at Kellogg Northwestern and is an investor and board member at Barra, a brand insights and sentiment measurement company. In 2011, he was named to the first ever Fortune Executive Dream Team, has been named multiple times by Advertising Age as the #1 power player in marketing, and is a 2017 American Marketing Association Hall of Fame inductee. Jim served as Dean of the Young Marketers Academy at the Cannes Lions International Festival of Creativity from 2011 to 2020, and in 2013 pioneered the CMO Accelerator program at the Cannes Lions Festival. Today, you'll learn why finding your brand purpose is so important to unlocking the profits and the impact you seek in the world. Plus, Jim shares the 3 reasons why, even with the best intentions, people blow the communication of their brand purpose. So please welcome to the Business of Story, Jim Stengel. Jim, welcome to the Business of Story.
Thank you, Park. Good to see you. Can't wait to get into it with you here on a sunny day in Cincinnati.
Oh, you actually have a sunny day in Cincinnati.
We have a beautiful day. It's about 65 degrees, beautiful spring day. After I'm finished this, I'm going to go out for a nice walk and sit outside and have dinner.
Oh, well, there you go. I was actually supposed to be in Cincinnati yesterday. I was going to be doing some work with the U.S. Air Force out there on some training, and then it got moved. So I would have been in your lovely sunny city. Instead, I'm up here in northern Arizona with the wind. It's cold and windy today. We're ready to get back to spring again.
Come to the Midwest, Park. Come to the Midwest. We'll show you sunshine and blue skies.
Well, this interview is a long time in coming because I read your book, Grow. And I don't know, when did this come out? 2008, 2009, maybe? Something like that?
No, it came out right at the new year of 2011, actually.
2011.
Yeah.
It was super powerful for me. I mean, you were one of the first thought leaders that I had seen that really started exploring the idea of purpose-driven brands. And then, of course, all the work you did at P&G, Procter & Gamble, around purpose-driven brands. I mean, you had certainly the credentials to be talking about it, yet it seemed like it was fairly new to the world back then. Or was it just new to me? How did you come upon it?
Oh, I think it was a bit new to the world back then. We started experimenting in the 90s with this concept at P&G, and one of the first brands that kind of tried a different way to think about their brand and branding was Pampers, which was in the late 90s. It was in tough shape. They had a very courageous team that said, how can we make a bigger impact on the lives of the people that we serve? After all, we're in the business of families and parents and babies. And that led to I would say, a revolution in how they thought about their business model. I was head of Western Europe at that time. And I think much of the work we did on that brand, which ended up building brand equity, tripling its size, becoming Even it was P&G's biggest brand. It's by far now P&G's biggest brand. And I think the template for it, or the model, was something our CEO wanted to expand. And I think that's a big reason I was appointed CMO.
And did it take a lot of effort to get people to shake marketers out of this concept of we're selling features and benefits into something of a bigger idea of we actually stand for something more than just a diaper, that we stand for mothers and fathers raising healthy babies? Was that a stretch back then?
I think that it was, in a company like P&G, like many companies, it was a very science-driven company, a very performance-oriented company, strong belief in superior products, and there's still a strong belief in superior products. Purpose is not an excuse or a way to get around that. If you offer a better product or experience, that's kind of table stakes, right? You had to get the data to show this was a better way of doing business. And P&G is a very data-driven company. They followed the data. But the basic question was, and how can you not go to good places with this question? And we're talking about stories here. When you ask a team of great people what they can do to better impact the lives of our consumers, customers, it goes to good places. And that's really what purpose is about, right? It's a confusing concept for many. They think it's about social good or cause marketing. It's not that at all. It's a business strategy. It's a way of thinking about your business where you're always asking, how can we impact the lives of those we serve in a deeper, better way? That's the question Pampers asked. And once P&G people started asking that question, opening up their minds, realizing product superiority is part of that, but it's more than that, then the imaginations opened up. We became more emotional, to be honest with you. We became, I think, a much more empathetic company, and a company that asked more questions, was even more curious. And it's always been a company that has had the consumer at the center of what they do. It's been the company with great ethics, great integrity. But this, I think, unleashed people's imagination, and great things always come from that, and they did for P&G. And I think when P&G does something, the rest of the industry looks at it. And I think the early work we were doing at Purpose in the 90s, led to a lot of other interesting work across industry. And I think that continues. It's a journey that you never end.
Well, it seemed like 2000 and aughts, that first decade here in this century, the word purpose and purpose-driven brands really started taking off. A lot of groups, companies, got into it, and maybe a lot of because of your lead and P&G lead, Unilever, big time into it. And then it felt like, and correct me if I'm wrong, I spent 5 years at Arizona State University as an adjunct professor teaching storytelling in their School of Sustainability. And again, your book, Grow, was always on my reading list for the master's students that we were working with. And the thing that seemed like it kept coming up, Jim, was that some brands, they wanted to push for purpose, but they weren't quite getting there, so that greenwashing came up. And sometimes it wasn't like they were notoriously greenwashing. They were just making mistakes and trying to sell their purpose when in actuality they weren't doing it. They had to kind of step up. And then it seemed like the consumer base started getting, a little bit disenfranchised with this whole purpose thing because they had seen so many companies not really delivering on that. Have you seen that? And what is the trending now, do you think?
We think about purpose in 3 stages, honestly. One is you have to find your purpose or rediscover your purpose. And it's always inside the company somewhere. And all you have to do is sort of uncover it, reveal it. And no one cares about a company more than the people who work there, right? So you have to find your purpose. You have to put it down, you have to socialize it, you have to think about it. And that's in some ways the easy part, right? And that's sometimes where people stop, which is a shame. The second phase is you have to activate it. You have to bring it to life in daily work. You have to think about it in your work plans, in your performance reviews, in every functions work. So that's the hard lifting. That's what's its impact. What's the pre-post of life in a company once you begin to activate your purpose? And you really have to tie into your employees' imaginations, their creativity, I think, to get to that. So that's where the heavy lifting is. And then the third phase is measuring it and baking it into into how your KPIs as a company. And I don't think we're very far along on that part. And so I've spent a lot of my time in the last few years thinking about the measurement of purpose, looking for partners to work with on that. I've discovered a company and invested in it. It's a company called Barra. I think it's a very promising way to measure purpose and link it to business results. And so those three phases, I think most of the world has discovered purpose as a better way of doing business. So I think we're pretty good on phase one, where I'd give us a C- on phase two, and I'd give us sort of a D- on phase three. And when it gets to greenwashing, the issue, Park, is if you don't do those three phases, then you lose credibility. So if a CEO or a CMO or an executive team gets all excited about their purpose, they have lots of engagements and rollouts and town halls, and then nothing happens on activation and it's not baked into your measurement system, people get cynical. And that's where all of the, if you will, the greenwashing or the lack of trust starts to seep in. And so you got to be all in. This is not a quarter by quarter idea. This is a long-term idea. It's a company idea. It's a strategy idea. It's a better way of doing business. And increasingly, as you know, the data is proving that out.
And I had a chance to work with Barra. We'll talk about them in just a second because I think that their platform is really fascinating on how to measure brand sentiment in the world so that you know what kind of stories to live into, create, activate, tell, and measure, to your point. Jim, can you give us an example of a brand, and maybe it's one you've worked with or one that you've been watching from the outside looking in, that has done a good job, where they came from, how they found their purpose, how they actually activated it, and maybe their even measurement? Someone that might surprise us?
Yeah, I'll give you one example. It's actually a Canadian real estate company, commercial real estate company. It's probably not a category you'd expect to be big in purpose. It's a market leader. They do large office buildings, large apartment buildings, major player in the Canadian market. They had this insight that, if we don't differentiate ourselves on something of deeper meaning, we're just going to be commoditized, right? Other people can put up developments, can create developments, can build office buildings, can build hotels. But if we can somehow come up with a purpose that's right for us, that's natural for our people, that comes out of our history, and if we can engage our associates and employees in that and bring it to life, that could make us a more successful, differentiated, profitable company. So they set out on a journey, and they were very serious about it. Total alignment with the leadership team. They were patient to get to the right place without putting it into the not urgent quadrant. They fully socialized it by function with the lawyers, their financial people, their customer service people, their sales people. So they went department by department. What does this mean for you? How will life be different? How will you communicate differently? How will you tell different stories? How will we write differently? How will we approach projects differently? And then they thought very deeply about how they would measure this, how they would measure progress over time. And honestly, I worked with that company for a few years. The sense of commitment, energy, emotional commitment to what they were doing in the communities in which they served. And honestly, their purpose was much more, I guess they would have thought about their business as, we develop great buildings that deliver a great return for our shareholder. It turned into, we're going to think about transforming in a positive way every community in which we do a development. So what does that mean? What does transform in a positive way mean for each community we go into? Well, they started thinking about their tenants and how to help them solve problems. They started thinking about the area in which they develop and what does that mean for that whole area to be lifted up. So honestly, the sense of energy, commitment, sense of purpose just totally amplified in a category that, if you ask most people for their top purpose-driven brands, they will rattle off, Google, they will rattle off Patagonia, Apple, all the usual suspects. This is a commercial real estate firm that saw a major difference in their business by tackling purpose in a serious and honest way.
Yeah, I had an example too that might kind of surprise you and listeners. I shared this just a couple of weeks ago on our show, but there's a Canadian company, Prate Auto Parte, which is my butchered way in French of saying ready, car, go. They're up out of Quebec. And Andre Martin Hobbs asked me if I could help them with their brand story. And quite honestly, Jim, I didn't know if I really wanted to get involved in a used car dealership in Quebec. I thought, boy, what kind of real impact do they have in the world? Add to that their primary focus was at-risk buyers. So you're talking people with really bad credit, subprime credit. And I'm thinking, all right, well, that's predatory selling. Typically you think of, right? That they come in, you're going to strap them with a car, you're going to make a lot of money on the margin, and you're going to send them out the door and probably repo it in 4 or 5 months and do it all over again. So that was the story I was telling myself. But then when I started sitting down with Andre and he explained what they're really doing, Jim, they were just using the car dealership to help Canadians repair their credit. So he said when someone would come in for a car and it was following, on the heels of the global recession, and maybe they lost a fortune, who knows, in a divorce, in healthcare, whatever, but they were good people that fell on bad times. And he said before anybody could buy a car from them, they had to go through a 2 to 3 hour financial planning program with his team. So they would sit down, full disclosure, understand what their income looks like, what their expenses were, and then they would put them in a car they could actually afford. So maybe they came in for that big Impala, but they got them in a Prius because that's what they could afford. And then they followed up with them every month for the first 4 months. How's it going? You making your payments? Anything we can help give you some guidance on it. Their goal was to keep them in that car for 2 years where they never defaulted on a payment because that would help repair their credit. Then we took it one step further, and he said the real tough thing is that these folks would come in and they were embarrassed because they had, the label of subprime buyer. And I said, well, let's reframe that and let's call them pre-prime buyers. Because what you are doing through this program is to level them back up, repair their credit, and get them back into that prime buyer, prime credit mode. And we landed on the tagline of Prate Auto Parte, your vehicle to financial freedom. So I could not think of a more outstanding purpose by Andre and his team. He goes, what we make are selling used cars to at-risk buyers, but what we make happen is financial freedom. So it's that whole idea of your stories are actually not about what you make, but what you make happen in the purpose-driven world. Isn't that an amazing story? Once again, thank our friends to the north.
Yeah, they totally flipped the script. But the good news is, this is becoming more and more common. I have a podcast as well, the CMO podcast. I talk to CMOs weekly. You just have to listen to a few of those and you realize that there are so many companies serious about this, and they realize the competitive playing field will be those who activate and sustain and keep innovating, through their purpose year after year. Autodesk, Intuit, Unilever, P&G, Ford, St. Jude's, these are institutions, organizations that really, really get it. They're trying so hard to make a difference in the world positively, and that's why these companies are attracting talent and are growing, frankly.
What's Autodesk doing?
It's a software company that is they just make the world work, right? And they're construction software, they are entertainment software. If you have redone a house, you've likely used their software. If you have gone to an action movie, you've seen their software in action. So they just kind of help the world work better than it wouldn't without them. They help us enjoy life. They help us live comfortable, safe lives in our condos and our apartments and our buildings and our offices. So it's a software that just about is everywhere. And people don't really understand the company that well, and they're on a mission to tell their story better. And I think they were on the Oscars. They had some very interesting ads on the Oscars. So they're on a journey to share their story more broadly.
Yeah, well, we're back in the day. Pampers is about raising healthy kids. What is Autodesk? You said makes the world work. I like that. Do they have one big overall positioning phrase that really captures their purpose?
I think that's pretty it. That's pretty right down the middle. They just said we help the world, get built and work together. They have a more clever selling idea that I can't remember right now, but they're really about how do we help things run in the world so that people can get on with their life and contribute to our society and to help raise families and work and do a great job. They're sort of the infrastructure that helps us do that.
Yeah. As you had mentioned earlier, and you said most companies are kind of at the D- mode in measurement. Let's talk a little bit about your work with BERA and how they are measuring brand sentiment out there and how that plays into purpose. Because it sounds like people are getting the idea of let's go find our purpose, let's activate it. They're doing a decent job of activating it. They may be doing a pretty good job of even talking about it, but they have no idea where they are on the road, on the journey, because they're not measuring the real impact. So what is it about BERA that got you interested, and what do you all do over there?
We were having an offsite with my team a few years back, kind of an annual offsite, and we spent 2 days together about what we were enjoying, what we were doing well, what kind of work we wanted to do more of, less of, the kind of stuff you do when you step back from the day-to-day and you think about your work and your impact and your purpose. And so we had a great 2 days with my team. And then at the end of the 2 days, I asked about 8 people to come into the room who were not involved in our company. So a mix of people. Some worked in the government, some worked in design firms, some were entrepreneurs, someone was from P&G, and we sat around a big circle and shared with those people what we were doing in the last 2 days and what we wanted to do more of and what was our story for our small company. And out of that 2 days, someone said to us, by the way, in that debrief, he said, listen, you guys are doing amazing work. You're helping so many companies find their purpose, activate it, but you're sort of a vitamin. How can you become a pain pill? How can you solve even bigger problems? So they pushed us. And that led us to have this aha moment after they left the room, the outsiders we invited in. And we said, the thing that we got to crack is people get purpose, they're trying to bring it to life, but we're nowhere on measuring it. So how can we somehow innovate in that space and find a way that there's a valid, trusted measurement system so that CEOs would report the measure of their purpose coming to life to their board? What would that look like? So we started visiting research companies, brands, learning what was out there. And someone who was working at Ancestry.com at the time said to us, you should go meet this company called BERA. We're working with them, and I think they have a very different way to think about measurement of brand equity. And I think all of that learning could translate into measuring purpose, because obviously brand equity and purpose are closely related. So we went and met the founders of BERA, and my team did, and they came back and they said, wow, Jim, you've got to go meet them. And I think there's a there. So I went and met the founder, Ryan Barker, and we hit it off. I liked how he was thinking about brand equity measure. And by the way, he started a company because he came out of the brand equity measurement space at one of the big companies. And he said, this is not helping brands, right? We're measuring things in the past. He called them brand vanity measures, and there was no link or causality with the business results on the brand. And while we all felt that when you build a stronger brand, you get better business, we didn't have a way to link that. So he set off to design a company that would link in a real-time, active way your brand equity to your financial results and guide brands and what they should focus on, do more of, less of, based on the platform. So he and his team created a software platform. It's always on. You can look at what your brand is doing by hour, by minute, by DMA, by customer group. So we started piloting what would this look like on purpose? So we developed a way to also take that same platform, the same methodology, and look at what about purpose activation is most linked to business results. And we developed much deeper understanding of what really drives purpose. So we had now sort of a quantitative way to think about, okay, here are the 4 general areas that drive purpose. And within those areas, here are the 13 specific attributes. And so we can help companies in a more data-based way to help them focus their efforts on building a business and a brand that is about purpose, that is about impact, that is about helping people, much more than they might have in the past. So that's the story of how we found Bera. We ended up investing in it, and all transparently, I'm on the board, and it's exciting what's happening. By the way, we just had a major article in Harvard Business Review published just about a week ago in the May-June edition of Harvard Business Review. And, getting into that magazine is a high bar. You've got to bring something new and helpful, or they're not interested. So the head of strategy, a professor at Wharton, and myself, we co-wrote a piece that is all based on the Bera methodology, the Bera platform. And actually, the piece is about brand marketing and performance marketing, and why is there tension among these two. And our basic thesis in the piece is brand marketing is much more measurable than you think, and performance marketing is not quite as measurable as you think. But if you get those two working together, you will build a much more successful and powerful brand. So anyway, if your listeners are interested, go to HBR. It's in the May-June edition. It's a long piece, 10 or 11 pages, lots of data in it, but highly readable. It's a good story. Park, you should read it. I think you'll enjoy it.
I'm going to.
But this is why I'm excited about the brand and the platform and how we came to know each other.
Yeah, and it's actually how you were on the show with me today. Thanks again for doing that, because Ryan Barker, I reached out to him. I got a chance to do a lot of work with the Bera team in story training, sales training last fall. And I said, hey, I see that Jim's on your board, and I've been trying to track him down for a decade to be on my show. All right, 8 years. I've only been around 8 years. So it was great. Can you, for our listeners, would you define what you mean by brand marketing versus performance marketing? Because it just came up in a conversation the other day, and I found that a lot of people in the room did not truly understand what the difference was.
Well, I don't love the terms, right? Performance marketing and brand marketing, but it is a lexicon of the industry in many ways. Brand marketing would be the stuff that you do that would be a bit more ethereal. Most of the advertising you might see, Nike's a good example. Most of what you see on their paid advertising would be classified as brand advertising. It's building the emotional connection to a brand. It's kind of sharing the brand's values. It's offering something aspirational. And it's typically not as easily measured, right? So think about it as the right brain part of brand building. So with the rise of the internet and digital marketing, so we were able to look, when you think about an email campaign, you think about a banner campaign, you think about a YouTube campaign, you think about something on Facebook, Snap, whatever it might be, you can see what happens with that in a very granular way, right? And what that led to. So because it was, in theory more measurable, more and more money has flown, has come over to performance marketing. So over the last 20 years, there's been a major shift. So the brand marketing budgets have shrunk, the performance marketing budgets have expanded. Now the risk in that, and a lot of people feel that, is, we're not telling stories. We're losing our brand narrative. We're not building equity in the brand. We're not building a brand that people would be more loyal to, would pay more for, which is obviously a good definition of a brand. So there is uneasiness about it, but it still wasn't changing the trajectory. So we jumped into it and said, Bera is now able to show that when you grow your brand in certain ways, it's having a direct impact on the economic value and the business results of your brand. So we think we have this platform that can help people make the right decisions on the split of money. And so that's basically and in a lot of companies, it's a tension. In many companies, performance marketing and brand marketing are in different departments. They have different bosses. They have different KPIs. So one recommendation in the article is, come on, have the same KPIs. Brand marketing should be held accountable for performance, and performance marketing should be held accountable for the brand getting better. And you need a measurement platform that delivers that. And that's really what the article was about. And it gives 3 case studies in there. It got 3 brands that have implemented a common North Star, have rethought their measurement platform, and it shows what they did and the results they saw.
It's funny that I guess it's performance marketing that drove me out of the ad business. I had, ran my own agency in Phoenix for 20 years, and we were really mostly around branding and traditional advertising. And then when digital came in, I like to say that, well, our clients used to own the influence of mass media. Now the masses were the media, have become the media, and so they own your story. And then, of course, you get in that performance marketing is, Park, all of a sudden we don't really care that much about the brand story, the emotional impact, whatever. Just get us out there, just digital ads, here and there and whatever. And I just started losing my taste for our business because I think I probably kind of came up in it like you did. What does a brand stand for bigger than just what the product or service is they're offering, what kind of impact they have in the world? So this notion about brand marketing, and while it's been on the decline, maybe coming back a little bit as people are realizing we just have to tell a better story to stand out in this din of marketers out there. BERA, as I understand it, working with them briefly as I did, is they're able to use AI to go out and monitor the sentiment through dialogue, communication, social media posts, whatever, that are happening around the world about a particular brand, and then taking that context in and applying a score, a measurement to it so that they can go to a brand and say, hey, your old story of whatever, like I'm going to be out with McCormick next week in Baltimore, the spice company. Of course, they've been around forever.
Yeah.
And I'm just using them as an example. It might be your old story, McCormick, of, being that herb and spices in the kitchen still resonates, but it needs to be freshened for a new audience. And we can demonstrate this to you through the analytics, essentially, that we did on your brand sentiment, emotion, story, versus the performance marketing side, which just comes back in with engagement rates and that sort of thing. Do I have that right?
No, I think you generally do. I think what we feel is that these things should be integrated. We should understand the spending much better and what it's driving, and we sort of break the paradigm that brand marketing absolutely can be measured, and performance marketing can be measured both in terms of what its clicks or sales it's generating, but also its impact on the brand equity. And BERA has a very strong case for showing the economic value of all of this. I think it's a modest breakthrough, maybe more than a modest breakthrough, in fully understanding the impact of our marketing on creating economic value for a corporation, which is obviously super, super important.
Now, Jim, going back to your career, you've been at this for a while and have had really a tremendous impact globally on consumer goods, packaging, branding, and so forth. Do you feel like you came into the advertising marketing world as a gifted storyteller, or was it something that you felt like you had to learn? And maybe did you use it early on, and did you find more power in it when it became more topical in the last, 10, 15 years?
Well, I began my career, I don't know if you know this, Park, but I wanted to be a writer in college. And my dream was to work for Sports Illustrated. It was very hard back then, and Sports Illustrated, when I graduated from college, was like iconic. It's just absolutely iconic. And they had the best writers, the best photographers, and a 22-year-old kid coming out of college was not going to get a writing gig at Sports Illustrated. So I wanted to work somewhere within Time Inc., which was the corporate, the parent of Sports Illustrated. So I got a job in the books division of Time Incorporated, which actually was kind of a hot business back then, selling series. It was a subscription business, right? One of the original ones. So I worked with a large team of people who created giant series of books about World War II, about gardening, about seafaring, health. And so my first job out of college, I had to tell stories. We had to create a reason for a book, think about the stories we tell in the book. How would we tell them? Through photos, through drawings, through text. So, and you had to present your ideas in that company in front of senior editors, and you had to tell them a compelling story, or it didn't move forward. So I saw a lot of really interesting Time Inc. people who were very good at writing and storytelling in action. And so that's kind of where I began my career. And I spent 4 years there and got promoted all the way up to photo editor. So I kind of had that, I guess, in me. I was a reader as a kid. I read a lot of books. I was in plays. I acted. So I guess I was surrounded by story. And then when I kind of figured out when I was at Time Life that the action was on the business side in terms of decision making and strategy, I became interested in that. I saw the business kind of suffering a bit, the early signs of this business model falling apart. And I thought there were some bad decisions being made on the business side. I started to get to know them, ask if I could work with them, do special projects. I took a few business courses at night to see if I could hack it and liked it. And so I ended up going back to school full time, got my MBA. And in that process, I discovered Procter & Gamble. Obviously, they were the world's largest advertiser. That was kind of interesting. But I was compelled to them because of their story. And when they came to campus and told their story, it was, wow, here's a company that was founded in 1837 by two guys who married sisters, who believed in product integrity, who invented the branding concept, who had, arguably the first brand in ivory, and a company that leaned into new technologies, new ideas. And I thought, that's kind of a story I'd like to be a part of. It's obviously a great development factory for leaders. I saw the people that came out of P&G and what they went on to do. So not an easy place to get into. I did not get an internship my first summer. They did. I was persistent and was hired full time. So my new wife and I moved to Cincinnati to join this venerable company. It was a very tough place to begin at because it was a hard place to work as a new brand person for all kinds of reasons. But I was compelled by the story, and I thought I'd stay a couple of years and then move somewhere else because we were not from the Midwest, my wife or myself. I was East Coast, she was West Coast, and we got drawn into the story and got great affection for the people, the way they did business, the ambition, the purpose, and I ended up staying 25 years.
What year did you start there?
1983, and my first brand was a new brand at P&G. We were very big in the food business back then, and we were starting a ready-to-serve cookie business under the Duncan Hines brand and taking on Nabisco, Frito-Lay, and Keebler, all these bakeries that had been in business for a long time. And it was a big brief to take them on and win. And we thought we had a better product. We thought we had maybe a better go-to-market system. But we invested a lot of money. My budget as a new person on this new brand, they said to me, okay, we're going to launch this nationally in about a year. We would like you to design a sampling method to put these cookies into every mouth in America within 3 months.
Wow.
So I had to sample every human being in America. And so that's what I mean about ambition. So I was inexperienced, new to the company. So I set out to develop a plan, and it cost this is back in 83, it cost like $60 million. But they felt like if this cookie was in the mouth of every American, they would realize it's much better. taste like homemade, and the selling line was crispy, chewy, or one of the part of the slogan. And so I set out sampling every person in America, and that's a whole another story.
How'd you do it?
Well, to make matters worse, it was over the summer, and these were chocolate chip cookies in 6 flavors. So I ended up reserving every refrigerated truck basically in America. So, and working very carefully with the post office to get these samples out of refrigeration and into mailboxes within a finite period of time. So we generally achieved the objective, but I didn't imagine in business school when I was back at Time Life Books, I'd be reserving hundreds of refrigerated trucks across the country and to work with the post office to sample these delicious little cookies. But anyway, the brand ended up being a failure. We had a better product, but I think we missed a big consumer insight, and I think we underestimated our competitors, and that's why the brand failed and was discontinued years later.
What was the big consumer insight?
Well, I guess this was a very P&G. We looked at the category and said, well, a huge share of the category is chocolate chip cookies. So we're going to come out with chocolate chip cookies in 6 flavors. I think we had butterscotch chocolate chip, mint chocolate chip, double chocolate chip. And we felt if we got 4 to 6 feet of shelving with chocolate chip cookies in the aisle, it was the biggest part of the category, then we would surge to market leadership. And the insight I think we missed was people buying cookies just like to buy different kinds, right? That's why the category's fragmented. You want shortbread one week, you want fudge stripes another, you want chocolate chip another week, you want peanut butter sandwich cookies, you want Oreos. And we followed the data without, I think, thinking about the habits and practices and emotion in the category. And so we didn't have a diverse enough lineup to achieve our goals, frankly. And then and competing against these big bakeries who had direct store delivery, and for our listeners, that's when the company has its own trucks and goes into the stores and fills its own shelves. We went through the retailers' warehouses because that's how P&G operated, and we thought that was a more efficient way to go. But what happened is we go through the warehouse, and our competitors would see our brand in the store and move it aside, and put their displays in front of ours and take over a few feet of our shelf space. We didn't have the people in the store to compete with that. So Frito-Lay and Nabisco had drivers, trucks, and we underestimated the competitive power of that.
What's interesting in the telling of that story is we so often think about the romance and glamour of brand marketing, meaning creating those big TV commercials and having that coordinated campaign just knock it out of the park and having messages that really resonate with an audience. Very few of us think about the activation of it, everything you went through as the newly minted MBA that came out, and now you had to work on not only coming up with the ideas, the strategy around this, but the logistics of pulling it off. Was that kind of a surprise to you coming out of school? Were you thinking you were going to be on Hollywood sets doing big commercials, and you found yourself doing the nuts and bolts trench work?
I thought I'd be on Hollywood sets a bit more than I was, right? Which was kind of zero. I knew the early jobs at P&G was a lot of grunt work, right? And I did a lot of analysis. I did a lot of business reviews and summaries of how we're doing in the market. So you really learn in your early days at P&G how to write, how to think, how to compose a memo. P&G is maybe world-class on that. I'm not sure anyone, at least historically, and I suspect it is the same today, teaches thinking and writing quite as well as they do. So to this day, I can write a very persuasive one-page memo in about 10 minutes on just about any topic. They just really, really, it's in some ways, it's a very efficient way to tell a story. Mm-hmm. So, but I didn't expect when I was coming out of my MBA that I would be in retail stores at 4 a.m, right, helping to reset shelves, to cut our brand into it, and to be talking to the post office and the big trucking companies in the U.S. about delivering. I don't know how many was that. It was probably, what was the population of the U.S. in 1983? 200 million. So something like 80 million households.
Every mouth gets a cookie. That's a lot of cookies. That's a lot of mouths.
Yeah.
Then, so you're dealing with the nuts and bolts. You're dealing with very much of the logic, reason-driven part of making a brand work. When was the first time you saw this idea around purpose? Because it's much more ethereal, right? It's much more, it's important, but it doesn't. It's the soft skill of branding.
I think it probably goes back way earlier than I was a paper boy when I was growing up. I delivered the paper. Yeah. And back when I had my streets, and I did it every day after school. And, a lot of the people were senior citizens, and I would deliver the paper, and I wasn't time bound on this. I mean, I had to get it done within about 90 minutes, I guess. But if I saw someone sitting inside watching television and the door was open, I would knock on the door and say hello and drop the paper off. And so, I got to know my clients, I guess I'd have to say. Mm-hmm. And I developed a bit of a relationship with them, and I realized I could brighten up their day a little bit if I took a few minutes to talk. And of course, senior citizens love talking to a 11-year-old kid, So maybe the early seeds were planted then. But I would say when I joined Procter, my first brand manager assignment after cookies and going on sales training and all that stuff was Jif peanut butter, and that's another good story. I had a really diverse team way back even in the 80s, and we were locked in a share battle with Skippy, Peter Pan, private label. No one could break out of it. We basically had the same share month after month. And it was a very regional business. Skippy was stronger in the Northeast and West. Jif sort of had the Midwest. Peter Pan had the Southeast. So we got this team together, and we said, hey, gang, let's break out of this. What will it take? What could we do for moms, dads, parents, kids to mean something more than a nutritious spread that tastes good?
I can still hear the frustration in your voice, Jim.
No, well, actually, getting that team's imagination going.
Yeah.
And so we ended up saying, well, we're going to be about helping mothers with their kids' nutrition. So we're going to start providing nutrition information about our brand and other things. We asked moms what they were most concerned about, and it was their local schools. This was even back in the 80s. So we said, well, what could we do to help PTAs through our brand? And and this is before we had the data we have now and the way of collecting data. We ended up doing a drive where every jar of Jif that was sold, we donated $0.10 per jar to the local PTA. And we set up a system where we could actually do that. That had a profound impact on our share. And you cut all this away. We were asking the question, how can we make a bigger impact on the people who we serve, and how can we align with their values more in a way that makes sense for our brand, right? So that all led to programs that came out to bring that to life in advertising, in direct marketing, in relationships with the farmers. Because we even went down and saw the farmers and say, quality is so important, and we want to be the highest quality. And we ended up putting some of our farmers in our communication. So it was a comprehensive effort, Park. The people who worked with me back then would still recall that. They've all gone on to amazing things as well. But we ended up breaking out of that log jam. We ended up building points and points of share, becoming the number one brand in the U.S. by a lot. And that's a hard thing to follow as a competitor, right? Because everything I'm talking about here is not easy to do. It's something you have to align around, have consistency on, have creativity on it. But that's purpose. We weren't calling it purpose back then. We were calling it, it started with a compelling need to break out of a share jam, a share deadlock, and we arrived on purpose. And I think from that moment forward, well, I didn't articulate it as purpose until the 90s. In every assignment I had at P&G all the way up through Pampers and as CMO, that's sort of the mentality I tried to bring to my assignment and to my team and to the way we did business. And the Jif story got so much adulation inside, admiration, I guess, that we ended up being profiled in a big annual company meeting back when we were filling the Coliseum once a year with managers from around the world and telling the best stories of P&G marketing and brands. And my team and I were put on the stage to tell that story. And that was a huge thing back then. That was a huge thing.
Jim, was that your first aha moment around purpose? There's another way to skin this marketing share cat, and it is around, first, like you say, let's go find it. What are we really looking for? Oh, we want to help moms, schools, and the PTAs. Then you got to activate it. So you got to go out there and you got to make it all happen. You're going to give 10 cents. Was it 10 cents or 10% of every purchase?
No, 10 cents. 10 cents.
10 cents. So you've got that. But now you've got a mechanism that you can actually measure, because you can measure how much was given out during the course of a quarter, a year, whatever. You can tie that back to what did you do, with market. By the way, what was the market increase? When you said everything was pretty much status quo.
We were about a 28 share back then, and we ended up getting as high as 35.
So the three things you're still preaching today, you can go back to Jif and say, hey, it worked way back when.
Yeah, Park, that's absolutely right. And I think, a couple other lessons on that. It all starts with what are you trying to do? Purpose is not a concept to make us all feel better. I mean, it does do that, but it begins with purpose is helping you build a much stronger business that attracts talent and makes a difference with your customers. So it starts with a compelling challenge. Pampers years later was having a really difficult time in the market. And purpose was the way we felt we could differentiate ourselves. And the same with a real estate company in Canada. It began with a challenge. So I think it always has to begin with, what are you trying to do? What's your ambition? What's your challenge? What's your compelling need to change? As you know, people don't change unless there's something that drives them emotionally and rationally to change habits. So I think that's one big lesson. Another one is, I had a great team, right? And the team was charged up to do this. They were aligned. They loved working together. They had fun. They had a shared ambition. They listened to each other's ideas. We got on famously with the R&D group, the manufacturing group, the finance group. So no silos, one ambition, fun, energy, creativity. And that's a leader's job, but we don't see enough of that in companies, as you know well.
Yeah. Well, one of the things that really struck me in Grow way back in the day now is, this was on the heels of the global recession, you had said of 50 of the companies that you studied that had a real purpose-driven mission behind it, they outperformed the S&P 500 by like 400% during the worst of times in that global recession. I can't think of a stronger ROI argument towards the brand purpose and finding that story to build trust.
No, absolutely. And I think it's only gotten, there's since that book was published, we've gotten better and better data to support the theory. And whether you look at studies that Interbrand's doing, Deloitte's doing, Bayer is doing, you go on, it's all showing that those brands that have a purpose, by the way, is relevant for their category, relevant for the brand, relevant for their people, and it's activated and it's measured and they're consistent with it, that leads to success. I was at the AAF Hall of Fame induction ceremony in New York City last week. We honor sort of a lifetime achievements for remarkable people in the industry. It's such an inspiring night. It's the best night, I think, in our business. So many inspiring stories. And they also honor a company every year. And Unilever was the company they inducted into the Hall of Fame this year. And Unilever's had, as P&G, a long-standing commitment to purpose. And the brands that activate it the best are the ones that are growing the best. And when the representative from Unilever, Essie Eggleston, who used to be at P&G, got up to accept the award, that's what she talked about. And she gave examples of the impact they're making with their customers in the world through their brands. And it was a very heartfelt speech, very powerful speech.
Amazing. So finally, and I'll let you go here because I know you're an awfully busy man, I just want to quickly touch on your new book, Unleashing the Innovators, How Mature Companies Find New Life in Startups. Is this, are you veering away from purpose-driven content at this point, or is it the next phase of a purpose brand?
No, I think that book was very much about, I did grow and it did well, and my agent and publisher said to me, we were having a discussion about what's next. He said, this was back 2000, when I started this book, about 2015, 16, and it was, there are so many companies, big companies, working with startups, and what's going on? What's bringing them together? Is it purpose? Is it technology? Is it innovation? Is it clash of cultures? Who's getting it right? Who's not? What's the playbook? What are the stories out there that are interesting to tell? So we set out to, and obviously I was an entrepreneur. I'd left a big company, and I had an interesting perspective from both sides of this. I was at that time working with a bunch of startups, and so it was interesting for me. So I started, the research, and I worked with a company we did a quantitative survey about what was working and what wasn't. So that was the backbone of the book. And then I went out and visited a lot of companies and their partnerships, and came up with, a bit of a playbook for big companies and startups who want to really make this work well for them. And so it was a really fun book to research and write. It was very powerful. Of course, purpose, obviously if a big company and a startup are not working well, it starts with they don't have a shared purpose. I didn't go in assuming I'd find that, but that's what I found. So that was certainly the link to grow. But this one was just about something's happened in the market that I don't think we fully understand. Let's go learn about it. And then shortly after that was published, I started thinking about this podcast that I'm doing. And Gary Vaynerchuk called me and said, we need to do a podcast for CMOs, about CMOs, hosted by a CMO. And he said, you're the guy who can do it. I'll help you with it. And I put him off about 4 times. And if you know Gary, he's persistent. He doesn't take no for an answer. So he kept coming back. He kept calling me. And I said, okay, let's try 6 episodes or so. And I wanted to anchor that on purpose, talk to these remarkable CMOs and about purpose. What's going well for them? What about the idea is resonant with them? Do they believe in it? Do they activate it? What's its role in their job? And obviously we get into a lot more things. We get into their own personal purpose, their own personal stories. That's what has made the show so successful. But I can remember I said to Gary, let's try, this is 4 years ago now, let's try 6 of them. And now we're like at, episode 270 or something like that.
It's funny how they take off, isn't it?
Yeah. So I think everything has revolved in some way, Park, around purpose. But I try to keep my mind open and stay curious, go in asking questions, not assuming I know the answer, not assuming I know what makes someone tick. And so I find doing the podcast, as I'm sure you do, is a great exercise in creativity and curiosity. And I think it keeps me really fresh by entering someone's life every week in a different category, a different industry, a different team. And I put in easily 5-6 hours of research before I talk to someone. And my team helps me a bit with that. But I want to go in trying to figure out what unique story can each guest tell, and how do I bring that out? And sometimes it's something that happened to them, in their career. Sometimes it's a relationship they might have had with a boss or a parent. And I don't go somewhere where someone's not comfortable, but usually there's 2 or 3 things out there that I think, this is something that they can talk about that in a way that no one else can, and I've got to find that.
Being a podcast host is also kind of self-serving because we get to talk to so many and meet so many really interesting people. And again, you are one of those in my world, and it's just a pleasure to have you here, Jim. Where can people learn more about you and your good work?
LinkedIn, Twitter, my website, any of those places. I'm pretty accessible and I'm pretty available, and I try to be responsive as I can with, so. But I enjoy this, Park. Congratulations on all you're doing, helping people tell stories. I say to so many of my classes that I teach at the Kellogg School, I teach with Deloitte, I teach at the CAN program, if you can't communicate, it all falls apart.
It really does.
All the work you do, if you can't communicate, no ideas can move into action. You can't start a movement. You can't build a community. So it's such an important life skill. So thank you for all you're doing with Barra and other companies to help them tell their stories better.
Well, I appreciate that. And Jim, I will forward to you my short little mini course on the and, but, therefore. I think from a brand marketer standpoint, it'll kind of blow your mind. When I learned about it about 10 years ago, of course, I've been in the branding world for 35 plus years, most of that around that purpose-driven brand thing. It was this framework that I wished I'd learned in the 3rd grade. And now the impact it has, the ROI you can actually apply to it, everything from social media engagement to literally sales ROIs. When I hear from salespeople that went in and said, God, I changed my presentation using your ABT, and I've been trying to close this thing for 6 months, getting nowhere, and they sign the contract an hour later. That contract's worth $250,000, Park. I'm going, that's pretty good ROI for 3 little words, and, but, therefore. So I'll have you check it out. But I appreciate you being here, man. This has been great fun for me.
Thank you, Park. Enjoy the weekend. Hope it gets sunny out there as it is in Cincinnati.
Well, it is going to be nice here in another day or so. The wind will subside, and then the sun will come out, and finally get out and hit the golf course again. So we got done with our record winter snowfall, and now it's going to be an absolutely gorgeous spring. Just got to get through the wind. I want to thank all of you, too, for watching and listening this edition of The Business of Story. If you like what you heard, feel free to share it with your colleagues, friends, family. If you are working on a purpose-driven brand, man, I cannot recommend Jim's book, Grow, highly enough. It stands the test of time. 2011, he said, it was published. I still go back and refer to it. And like I said, it was absolutely recommended reading for my master's students at ASU in the School of Sustainability. So share the show around. And of course, if I can be of service to you, come on over to The Business of Story. If you have yet to take the and, but, therefore online course, check it out at businessofstory.com/ABT. And until next week, when we will have another amazing story artist right here for you like Jim, remember that the most potent story you'll ever tell is a story you tell yourself. So make sure that's epic. Thanks so much for listening and watching. Take care.